slicing up the mushrooms. Really, I'm just slicing around the stem. The stem is pretty tough and you don't want to eat this. Make sure you save that for your compost pile. It doesn't really matter about the size or the shape. I'm just kind of doing a rough cut. Really, it's a personal preference on the shape or the size that you want on your mushrooms. Once I have these chopped into bits, I throw it back in the hot water to rehydrate a little bit more. Here's the rehydrated dried mushrooms that I've chopped into bits. It's still soaking in the water. As you can see, the water's getting a little darker and it's going to be full of flavor. Alright, here we are at the pork belly. So this is about a 2.5 pound piece that I picked up at the local Asian grocery store. This one appears to have a nipple on it still attached. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with the nipple quite yet. But I'm going to go ahead and cut this into pieces. Now you can make this any size you want. You can make them very small, 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch chunks, or you can have them in bigger strips. I personally like a bigger strip like this, so I just cut this right down and that would be your whole piece of pork belly. So it's really up to you. The size and the shape is really not all that important. Sometimes you'll find that in the smaller cafes that it'll be smaller pieces. It really just depends. It's really a personal preference. So this pot is pretty hot right now. I'm going to go ahead and put some pieces of pork belly down there. Now that the pork belly is crispy on both sides, I'm going to remove it from the pan. And here's the garlic from before. I'm going to put that in there. Let that crisp up just a little bit. Get a little bit of brown and nutty flavors in there. This is the way I like to make it. If you don't want to do this step, you can just dump all the other ingredients in here. You can skip this crisping part, but I personally like the nutty flavor of garlic, and it tends to bring out a lot of the aroma if you do this step. As the garlic is crisping, you can start adding pieces of the ground pork. Is to add some spice powder. I add about a teaspoon. So add the ground white pepper. I tend to like stuff a little spicier, so I'm going to add a little bit more of this pepper. And this is fried shallots. You can pick this up at any Asian grocery store. I really like this. I'm going to go ahead and put in 2 spoonfuls of that. You can always add more. It's really, really nice. It's sweet. It's crispy. It's really, really wonderful aroma that it gives to the dish. What I'm going to add are the dried mushroom pieces that I've rehydrated in warm water and chopped into pieces. I'm not going to dump the water in there just yet. I'm going to allow the pork that's already in there to get a little bit more brown and crispy. Brown pork is pretty much done. I'm going to add the pork belly back into this ground pork mixture. Make sure to let all those juices get right in there. The next thing I'm going to add is dark soy sauce. In the recipe, I did put that you need about 1/3 of a cup. It could be as much as 1/2 to a whole cup, depending on how much water you add in yours and how big a batch you make. But I mostly go by look, and I look at the color of the soup. Add back some water. I'm starting off with the water that I use to soak the mushrooms. Now, Taiwanese cooking tends to have a little sweetness to it, so if you want to be more authentic, you can add just a little bit of sugar. About 1 teaspoon or 2 teaspoons ought to do it for a batch about this size. I'm checking the color of my soy sauce. So at this point, I've added about 3 additional cups of water in addition to the water I use to soak the mushrooms. And I've added about 1/2 to 2/3 of a cup of soy sauce. And you can see the color is still pretty dark, and you can adjust this later. If you like it a little less salty, a little less soy flavor, you can add more water. If you like more soy, you can add even more soy. There have even been people who say that this is not even salty enough, and they add salt in addition. Now what you're going to do is to let this braise for a while. So after about 1.5 hours of braising, you have this wonderful dish. It's often called Taiwanese pork belly or braised sweet Taiwanese pork belly. My mom calls it Taiwanese chili with pork belly. Now you wouldn't eat this straight up. Typically you would serve it with either white rice or noodles. The dish doesn't really have that much color, so when you do serve it, you'll want to also garnish it with a little bit of coriander or cilantro or some scallions. You'll see these pieces of nice thick pieces of pork, a nice layer of fat, little pieces of ground pork, and also these mushrooms that are just full of flavor. So this is a really fantastic dish, and I hope you enjoy it.